When you have the courage to just say, I'm going to do that, you can do your research, watch a lot of YouTube videos, read books on it. Hi there and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Kaylee, and I'm really glad that you can join me today as I share 10 skills that I feel like are very valuable for young women to learn, especially if you're like me and you're young and you don't have a house of your own, but maybe eventually someday you want to have that house of your own. No matter what circumstances it is that you find yourself in, these are skills that are going to be valuable to learn now, especially if you have extra time to hone these skills, even if they don't help you today. And probably most of these skills will actually help you today, or they might help in your near future, or they might help you in 10 or 20 years, or probably actually for the rest of your life. So I'm going to get right into them. The first skill I want to talk about is contentment. And you might say, Kaylee, contentment really is not a skill, it's more of a character quality. But in some ways, I think it is a skill because some days it takes a conscious decision to decide to be content with where God has put us. And a lot of us young women have a lot of big dreams and things we want out of life. And many of those things that we really want aren't really in our control. And if the Lord doesn't give us those things when we want them, we can let bitterness and discontentment grow in our heart if we're not careful. This is probably one of the biggest things that a lot of us young women need to grow in and to actually take time to work on. It's not something that just controls us. And also with being content in our circumstances in life, there's also being content with what we have. And I've seen a lot of young women and older women, who try to fill up a void in their lives by shopping or getting new things. And honestly, that's something that I have to keep myself from falling into. I tend to think that if I can just get this thing, or if I can finish that project, or do this or that, or go here or there, that I'll be more happy and feel better about my life. But the truth is that things don't satisfy. Only a true relationship with the Lord satisfies. Whether it's the situation you're in, a relationship, the stuff you have, whatever it is, if you think that you're going to be happy when you actually get that thing, then you might be surprised to find that when you do get that thing, you might be surprised to find discontentment still welling up in you because of new challenges or new problems, or it's not quite exactly what you thought it would be. So it's important to adopt a heart of contentment, to learn that, to really seek that from the Lord. No matter your circumstances right now, there can always be reason to find joy in our lives. The second skill I want to talk about is sewing, and not just sewing, but also altering or mending. When we tend to think of sewing nowadays, we often think of going to Joann's, and Joann's is actually closing, which is really sad, and picking up fabric and thread and notions and a pattern and paying an arm and a leg for all that stuff, just so that we can take that project home, work on it for hours and hours and hours, and then come up with something that could have been bought for way less than the time and money that we actually put into it. And while that sewing is fun as a hobby, it's not exactly the sewing I'm talking about necessarily. I learned to sew from a very young age, but what I have found valuable as I'm older now to save money and to be more resourceful with what I have is with altering and mending. There's so much immodest clothing out there, and it's really hard to find clothing sometimes that is the right color, the right pattern, suits your style, fits you well, is flattering without being like immodest. And that's where altering comes in handy. I go to the thrift store a lot. That's where I get a majority of my clothes, honestly. And what's nice about that is that I can go through and find clothing, and as long as there's enough material on a dress or a blouse, I can take that home and I can alter it if it doesn't fit me. And by doing this, I've been able to take a lot of garments that wouldn't have been wearable and made them into something that I love and use a lot, and only picked up for 50 cents at the thrift store. And yes, it takes some time, so it is really nice if you actually enjoy sewing like I do, but not just altering, also mending. In my family, whenever somebody's coat, or what are they called? Coveralls, or my dad's jeans rip out. My dad's an electrician, so he's on his knees a lot, and he just totally destroys his genes. Whenever we get a hole in something like that would be really pricey to replace, just whenever it gets a hole in it, then we have been able to mend that, to put a patch on it, to fix it. That saves a lot of money, and it also helps us to be more resourceful so that we're not just buying new stuff and throwing the old stuff away all the time, but trying to give something as much life as we possibly can before it is like completely done. The third skill I want to talk about is kind of along the same lines as the last one, and that is resourcefulness. We have fast food, fast fashion. We have everything cheap and easy to get. It's easy to get, and it's also easy to just throw in the garbage bin so we don't have to think about it anymore. And I don't believe that God wants us to use his creation so lightly and cheaply. And another thing that I've found valuable is to really consider when I'm buying something. Sometimes I will opt for the cheap side, but I try to remind myself that cheaper is not always more cost effective in the end. With a lot of the items that you can get for hardly anything, you're also getting what you pay for. If that thing that you buy is not high quality, then it's not going to last you very long. And I try to remember this when I'm doing my own personal shopping. And like I said, it's also good to consider what you can reuse. So in my family, we reuse Ziploc bags. It's something that my mom learned from her grandma. And Ziploc bags, especially if you use as many Ziploc bags as my family does, then you would find yourself going through a lot of Ziploc bags, and that'd be a lot of plastic just being thrown out. Instead, we use those bags as long as we possibly can and wash them and rewash them and rewash them until they rip out, and then we throw them away. Just little things like that. The next skill that I'm going to talk about is cleaning and organizing. I will preface this by saying that I am not a very clean or organized person by nature. I feel like I'm getting a little better about it, but when my sister and I were little, my sister was very clean and organized, and she would make me go through all my stuff under my bed, told me I had to get rid of 3 things every time, and so I would do that. And over the years, I started to weed out more and more stuff from under my bed until pretty soon I just didn't have anything under my bed, and my life is a lot easier. Perhaps part of the problem with some of us too, maybe you're like me in that it's not very satisfying, I guess, to just clean up as you go or to clean up every day and to make habits of doing that. It's more satisfying to go into an area that's really dirty, that has a lot of built up stuff laying around or dirt or whatever, and clean that up and make it look really nice. I've always liked dramatic before and afters. So for me, I don't know, there's kind of like a joy in when something gets really dirty and then it becomes really clean. And there's a lot of tips and tricks about how to organize things well or how to keep spaces tidy and clean. But I think for a lot of us, we know how to clean, and we just need to work on actually doing it. But maybe you're not like me and you do keep your spaces clean and neat, because I know there are people like that. And if that's you, then I'm just preaching to the choir, and bravo, I'm so proud of you. Okay, the next skill that I'm going to talk about, and you probably saw this one coming, is cooking. From a young age, my mom taught me how to cook when I was just so small and I had to stand on a chair in order to see above the counter. My mom made sure that me, along with my younger siblings, were in the kitchen with her, learning how to cook and making that a part of our lifestyle. And to this day, I'm very grateful that she did that for me, because I'm so glad that I don't have to learn that all when I need to know it. Learning to cook meals from basic ingredients is such a valuable skill. And sadly, it's a skill that seems to be going away as there's so much convenience in fast food. If you need a meal, you can go buy one at the grocery store, pop it in the microwave, and, a meal. So a lot of young women don't know how to cook, which I think is really sad, and is something that if you have the ability to learn and the time, or even if you don't, make the time to learn how to cook, because that's going to be so valuable for the rest of your life. And in a pinch, if you don't have that microwave meal, you're going to be so thankful that you know how to brown meat and put in vegetables and make a substantial meal from it. And the next tip I want to talk about is decluttering. And if you've ever been to a house that is just full of stuff, like unnecessary stuff that doesn't need to be there, stuff that doesn't have a home, not just a little bit, we all have a little bit of that, but like a lot, then you'll know that being there can kind of produce a sense of anxiety and overwhelm. It's really valuable to have the ability to decide if something is worth keeping or if it just is clutter and needs to go away. When you walk into a house that is not cluttered, and by that I don't mean like a house that is so bare and spotless and minimalist to the very core, but a house that is clean and organized, it's like a breath of fresh air. And our homes, I feel like, I might be going out on a limb by saying this, our homes are kind of like a reflection of our lives almost. So is our home a haven of security and peace and happiness and love? Or is it a chaotic motel where the whole family just comes back to crash at the end of the evening? It's also really good to keep this in mind when decorating, to really understand that your house says something about you and really tells the world a message about who you are. Now, by saying all this, I want to be careful and say that not all of us have it together perfectly all the time. And you shouldn't feel bad if you are in a season of clutter and messiness, because that does happen. And my family has experienced that too. When we were moving from our old farm to this farm and living in a camper while we renovated my great-grandparents' house, there was a lot of times where we just didn't have it together. And now looking back at that, even though our living quarters were crazy and all wild, we still had peace in our family and love and a vision towards what we were working on. Okay, moving on. The next skill that I want to talk about is a willingness to learn new skills. And I feel like a lot of these ones that I'm sharing with you are more character qualities than actually skills. Many of us are so scared to try new things or to do something. We think we need to leave it for the professionals to do. We don't think that we are capable of it because we don't have a degree. Just this last week, I decided to paint my car. And my car is, the whole hood and roof and top of the trunk had basically lost its top coat and it was looking really bad, what my mom called a bad sunburn. And I decided to just sand it all down and repaint it. And I did part of it first just to make sure that it would go well, and it turned out beautifully. So I went ahead and sanded down the whole car, and I filled in the dents from hail damage, and then I painted it yesterday. And as I ran out of paint from my last can, I looked at my car and thought, this is not good. The filler that I'd put in the dents of my car had not only stuck up out of the car and were clearly visible, they also sparkled. I feel like that's a situation where maybe I kind of got ahead of myself, but I'm still glad that I did it because it was a great experience. And if I hadn't done it, then I'd always wonder after my car completely rusted out, what if I had painted that thing? I'm going to sand it down again and do it again. I'm going to take out that dent stuff. I'm going to just leave the dents there. I'm going to repaint it, and it won't be perfect, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine. I'm so glad I did it. It was really discouraging last night, and I felt really, really bad after all the work and money I'd put into painting it. But when you have the courage to just say, I'm going to do that, you can do your research, watch a lot of YouTube videos, read books on it, ask friends who know more about it, But when you do that, in the future, your mind will say, oh, yeah, I painted a car 10 years back and it wasn't perfect, but I redid it and it turned out fine. And so yeah, I don't think it'll be any problem to paint my kitchen cupboards. The next skill I want to talk about is making God the first priority in your life. The Bible says in 1 Corinthians, the unmarried woman cares about the things of the Lord, that she may be holy both in body and in spirit. But she who is married cares about the things of the world, how she may please her husband. It's so important to develop habits now that someday you want to have. Right now, before you get really busy with whatever it is eventually that you really dream of. If you think that eventually when your life's all figured out and you're happy, then you're going to make the Lord your first priority, it's going to be a lot harder. So if you feel like I'm speaking to you, I am, and I would challenge you to seek to grow closer to the Lord and to deepen your relationship with Him. Number 9 skill I'm going to share is getting better with communication. It does take communication, good communication skills, to be able to speak in a way that is gracious and kind, but is also assertive and gets done what we need to get done. And this takes time and experience. Basic manners are pretty easy to learn, and they should be learned as well. But this that I'm talking about goes beyond just basic manners. To grow on the skill of communication, like I'm saying, it's good to go deep, because while it's easy to be good and kind and mannerly in public, who we really are comes out in our own homes. Communication is learning to say no to our own selfish desires and wants and emotions and moods, to choose to be kind and gracious with the people that we are closest with, even if we're hungry or frustrated or tired. Sometimes I need to tell my wild emotions that they are not in control, that I can look realistically at a situation and communicate about it gracefully without melting into a puddle of tears or getting angry or letting my big feelings show. It's good to learn to communicate like that. And then my next tip is time management. And this is something that is so easy for us to get wrong. It's something that if I don't manage my time well at the beginning of the day, often the rest of the day is just not that great. And if you struggle with managing your time and you feel like you're always doing the wrong thing at the wrong time and you're not getting done what needs to get done, it's really good to take time to make systems that work for you. And this is different for all of us. My mom does really well with planners and lists. I like to make lists, but often they're just in my head instead of being on a piece of paper. And the best book that I have found on this subject is called The One Thing. It helped me look at my schedule, which I was often feeling like I was a failure at setting up. And it made me realize that not every day is alike. And sometimes we need to prioritize the most important thing for the day or for the season, and that can change. And that just really helped me. Also, if you are interested, I made a video very similar to this topic, so I will leave it right here and you can go watch that one next, and we'll see you there. Bye!